Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning,
Morning,
and
good evening.
yeah. So today we are having Dr. S.K. Gupta. Uh, I have been following him since I think last 6 months, and he shares a very insightful things on his walls. So welcome, Dr. Gupta, and
Thank you.
I would request our senior member, uh, Kannan Rajmani sir, to introduce about CRFC, what we do, our visions and missions. Kannan sir.
Yeah, thanks, Ashutosh. Welcome, sir, and welcome everyone.
Thank you.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are across the globe. So CRFC we started 6-7 months ago, right? With an ambition or with the vision of actually bringing up a platform for the finance professionals, risk professionals, banking professionals, and also academicians to build a knowledge base and the platform for climate related financial risk, right? And so far we have been conducting a lot of programs. I mean, we have had several programs on what climate risk is all about, how this is actually transforming into the banking assets and overall economy, and what is sustainability as well. And this particular forum now has lots of senior membership from senior bankers, sustainability industry, right, risk professionals like Relasser and so on and so forth, and also experts from regulatory reporting field as well. We are trying to actually uh, build the platform more stronger in terms of looking at the climate risk data, looking at the evolving models around it, looking at the climate risk management itself as a theme, and seeing how best we can actually leverage this platform not only to actually build that knowledge across the industry, but also take up some projects with our which we are aiming to do with GARP and other global institutes, so that we stand as a market leader, or we stand not a market leader, rather, because it is a non-profit organization. We stand as a leader um, in terms of bringing out this knowledge to the industry, and also look at the implications and how best this can be how best this can be actually brought about as the climate related risk is going to take its turn in the next 20 years or so. We just want to aim to build such a strong knowledge base around it, and also to help the industry cope up with whatever data points they can get, whatever methodologies they can adopt to manage climate change. So far there have been a lot of sessions, as I told already, and again, we are actually looking at an interesting session from you, sir.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward, and
Thank you.
thanks, Kashyap. Over to you.
Okay. So before starting the session, I will just introduce Dr. Gupta, and so he's a gold medalist in post graduation from in commerce. He's a PhD and in corporate governance, and he's having around 40 years of experience in internal audit, finance costing, and he's a kind of, I consider him as an expert of the finance, and he has a very good knowledge of the sustainability and climate risk also, and today he will be conducting the session on green bonds. So over to you, Dr. Gupta.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, good morning, everyone, depending upon wherever you are. And thanks to CRFC for reaching out to me and inviting me to share my perspectives and interact with knowledgeable pool of members, highly intellectual, highly experienced in this particular aspect, wherein I've been invited to share my perspectives with regard to climate risk and what finance can do in this particular area. What are the perspectives? What are the dimensions? What are the financial tools which really can help the companies to mitigate climate risk, not only at the industry level, but even at the macro level? So thankful to have been invited to this session. I look forward to sharing my perspectives on this topic. Just give me a second. Let me share my presentation on the screen, please. Thank you. So we are going to talk about green finance. That's the implication. That's the challenge for the finance leaders of tomorrow as to how to combat climate risk, how to arrive at mitigation strategies, what kind of instruments to use so as to be able to fund the projects which are identified as climate mitigation projects and which help in mitigating the climate to a certain extent. All of you would probably tend to agree with me that the world is changing, and it is changing very, very rapidly and very significantly. I'm not only talking about the last 2 years, wherein the world has been impacted, rather the whole of humanity has been impacted by the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic situation. But even otherwise, if you look back 2 or 3 decades, there have been very, very significant changes that have taken place in this world, which have altered the way we live our life and also the way we work in different organizations. It's a very different world from what it used to be about 2 or 3 decades back. And these changes have been brought about by commonly known acronym. It's a VUCA word all around us, which is highly uncertain, very vulnerable, hugely complex, and very, very ambiguous. The business is not so straightforward. To make a living in this world, to live in this world is not so straightforward now anymore. There are a whole lot of uncertainties, complexities, and ambiguities involved in the whole process that you've got to have a different mindset. You've got to adopt different methodologies, approaches, and tools so as to be able to carry out your function in a more effective manner. But then at the same time, we have seen emergence of new age companies or the so-called startups, which are mushrooming all over the world, including India. India today boasts of over 100 unicorns, companies with valuations exceeding $1 billion US. And probably we are second only to the Silicon Valley, the US. Some of these companies, in fact, majority of these companies have very, very disruptive business models. World's largest travel car company does not own a single car of its own. Uber, world's largest travel lodging company, does not own a hotel property of its own. Airbnb, and the world's largest retailer, Amazon, does not have any or even one single brick and mortar store. These are amazingly disruptive business models, which were kind of unheard of till about a few decades back, but these are the realities of today, and these are mushrooming all over. Most of these new age companies, of course, are in the IT space, but then we also have new age companies and startups in other domains and other sectors. Even the existing companies are struggling to sustain over a period of time. How many companies in the list of Fortune 500, which existed 50 years back, are surviving today? Very few. The reason being that they've been probably a bit chaotic, probably not so serious about maintaining sustainability of their business model, probably not so serious about creating and building a resilient business model. And that has probably led to their downfall. And probably they've gone out of market on account of not being able to sustain over a period of time. When you look at many of the businesses in the marketplace today, you find many of the businesses have profitless turnover. They have a good enough, great top line, but end of the day, there's no profit. Or there are companies which have cashless profit. They have profit, a good enough bottom line, but then there is no cash or no liquidity. But when you look at the valuation of some of these companies, wow, skyrocketing, soaring very, very high. The point that I'm trying to focus on in order to build my presentation on today's topic is profitability, profit, And all those old financial matrices do not really work in today's world. What matters now and going forward is going to be valuation of the company, ability of the company to create value, ability of the company to preserve that value, and ability of the company to enhance that value going forward is going to be success mantra for the companies in a marketplace going forward. As Mr. Kofi Annan, the erstwhile Secretary General of the UN, remarked at the Paris Climate Agreement, the world is reaching the tipping point beyond which climate change may become irreversible. We will probably not be able to do anything if it reaches onto that particular level. And if this happens, we risk denying the present and future generations the right to a healthy and sustainable planet. And that's where the whole of humanity stands to lose. Because all of us have just one planet which we have inherited from our forefathers, and we have a moral responsibility of leaving it in the same shape for the future generations to come. If the tipping point happens, when the climate change becomes irreversible because of our destructive actions that we take today, either at the individual level or at the corporate level, there is a high level of risk that the present and future generations will probably not see the light of the day. They will probably not inherit a healthy and a sustainable planet. And that's where the whole of humanity is going to lose a lot. These words ring truer today than ever before. This is where we stand today in terms of climate risk, that the changes that are taking place in the environment all across the world because of our present actions at the individual level, at the household level, at the corporate level. Many of these actions are leading to destruction of the natural ecosystem. They are converting the planet into some kind of a Mars dump yard, from where definitely it's probably going to be difficult to come out if we reach on to the tipping point which Kofi Annan referred to while making his remarks at the Paris Climate Agreement. There's a lot of scientific research evidence available.
So, sir, one moment. Sorry for interrupting.
Yes,
Sir,
please.
can you make the slideshow mode so that full screen will be visible?
Full screen? Okay. How do I do that? Just a minute.
Slideshow mode. In the bottom, I think you will get an icon, sir, for slideshow mode.
I can do a slideshow, but will that work? This is the PDF. Yeah.
Oh, it is a PDF. Okay. Then proceed, sir. That's
Okay,
fine.
fine. Thank you. So there's a lot of research and compelling scientific evidence available that human activities have brought about significant changes in the climate in different jurisdictions and different geographical areas. Climate change is being increasingly recognized globally as a very, very critical source of financial risk for the businesses. Because of the changes taking place in the climate, the businesses are getting impacted in different ways. Financial risk as well as other kinds of risk are impacting the businesses, and this is being recognized globally as a critical factor to be discussed, of course, at the board level, of course, at the strategy level for most of the corporates. The uncertainty about the timing and the severity of the climate-related and environmental risk threatens the safety, soundness, and resilience of businesses. Whether a company will be able to survive next 50 years, next 100 years, next 150 years is going to be dependent upon what are you doing right now in terms of your actions of not being disrupting the climate or trying to do something to mitigate that risk which arises from environmental degradation. What is that you're doing as of today is going to make your future going forward as to whether your company will be sustainable over a long period of time in the marketplace or not. Climate-related risks refer to the potential risks that arise from climate change or from efforts to mitigate climate change. And of course, it's an interplay of various factors together. We also got to assess related consequential impact and the economic and financial consequences. You build a project and you have a project report. You seek funding for that project. Do you consider protecting the environment as an important cost? Because in order to work out true costs of operation of any project, of course, you've got to take care of externalities. And climate risk is one of the important externalities, which obviously has to be taken into account with a view to building up a cost structure, which is a true cost structure, which includes all the costs, including the externalities involved in a given project. The impact of climate risk is far-reaching in terms of its breadth and also the intensity, and it is relevant today for multiple lines of businesses, sectors, and geographies. That's what we got to be cautious about. So
can you try L?
Yeah.
Control L. Control L.
Control F.
L, sir. L for love.
Okay.
Control plus L.
Yes. Let me share my PPT then. If that works, let me check.
That's much better, sir. Because I think the video portion is good, sir. That's yes, sir. I think in the bottom slide, I got it.
I got it. Yeah.
Yes,
Now
good,
it is fine.
absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the Go Green signs you see displayed all our various stores, various public places are very catchy, of course, but actually these are going to become, have already become in most parts of the world as the mainstream term to be used for various purposes. Go Green as well as environmental awareness campaigns are intended to encourage humanity into taking necessary action, proactive steps today so as to prevent environmental degradation and to protect the environment and the planet for the future generations. Without human contribution and without human consciousness and necessary action at this point of time, if we don't take due efforts at this point of time, it's going to be very difficult for the humanity to be able to survive on this planet for a long time. Therefore, it is our responsibility to change our mindset, change our thinking, our behavior, our learnings. We may have to learn, relearn, and then apply that learning to improve upon our actions towards the environment and towards the climate risk. Of course, at the global level, the research indicates that more than half of the people surveyed across the world believe it is important to reduce own carbon footprint. More than 3 in 5, 62% believe it's now more important than ever before that companies behave in a more sustainable and eco-friendly manner. Of course, social media has increased awareness around environmental and climate change issues by almost about 30-35%, more so since the beginning and during and after the period of the COVID-19 pandemic that we have all had. So the research indications are very, very clear. There are many, many people, more than half definitely, maybe more than 3 in 5, who really believe that it is important to cut down on the carbon footprints, both at the personal level, individual level, as well as the corporate action level. And they believe that companies need to find ways in order to become sustainable and eco-friendly. And social media definitely is playing an important facilitating role in building up this campaign, building up this awareness. Actually, a silent revolution is taking place around all of us, which just cannot be ignored. Climate change has become part of the public consciousness efforts on the part of policymakers, government, NGOs, and other organizations, and even the institutional investors are putting a lot of pressure on the companies in which they tend to invest their funds so as to take care of this particular important aspect. Otherwise, they will find an alternate investment avenue. So far as financial sector is concerned, financial sector is one of the key sectors which impacts the functioning of the global economy and the economies of all the countries. And therefore, financial sector has a special responsibility to develop approaches and instruments in order to make environmental finance a mainstream priority. Green finance, the topic of today, has a positive impact on environment and it reduces the risk of climate change is the need of the movement. How do we ensure that the projects which are related to mitigation of climate risk are funded appropriately? What are the kind of new instruments which can be used for funding of those projects? How the banks can adopt green banking initiatives, how the branches of the banks can become green, how the bank data centers can go green. All that is part of the infrastructure and architecture that financial sector has to take care of with a view to contributing their might in building up a better world for the future generations. A new era of sustainability is touching every corner of the world. Consumers and markets are increasingly motivated to be more environmentally conscious, and they're exercising their power and voice through the products they buy. What is the product that they will buy depends upon where the product is coming from, which company the product is manufactured, how eco-friendly are the practices, manufacturing, distribution, marketing, sales, whatever, of the particular company where from this product is going to come out. There is mounting evidence that sustainability today is a life and death matter. It's no longer merely a recently developed buzzword. Sustainability is no longer merely a recently developed buzzword, but it has actually become a matter of life and death for all of us. So what is green finance? The word green finance is used interchangeably with climate finance, sustainable finance, even impact investing is part of green finance. Depends upon the context in which you propose to use this particular word. It imbibes within itself elements of sustainable finance, climate finance, even impact investing. Group of 20 nations uses the term green finance as a broad umbrella term that refers to financial flows required to support projects that benefit the environment and society by reducing pollution or tackling climate change. All these projects which we propose to take up with a view to reducing pollution, tackling climate change, developing renewable energy projects, all that requires a lot of money. How the money is going to flow into those projects? Will traditional financial instruments be good enough to be able to cater to the requirements of funding of these projects? Or do we need to develop and look at alternate financial instruments which will facilitate funding of these kind of projects is the challenge that all of us have to look at from the financial perspective. When companies focus on green finance, essentially what the company is doing is they're becoming responsible businesses. They're becoming responsible in carrying out their activities as part of the business operations. Green finance seeks to preserve the ecological integrity by encouraging the use of green technology. It also helps improve the efficiency of operations and, of course, sustainability and cutting down on the carbon footprints. Green finance actually at the macro level is kind of a strategy for the financial sector that is relevant around the world, all kinds of companies, all kinds of sectors. The focus and the talk about green finance is growing across the world. Money makes the world go around. When it comes to saving the planet, it all again comes down to finance. Finance is becoming a key driver in encouraging introduction, assimilation, absorption, acceptance of green finance involving capital markets in creating and distributing range of financial products and services that deliver both returns and environmentally positive outcomes. This is very important. When someone puts his money in an investment, he's obviously looking up for ROI, return on investment, maybe also return of investment. Both are ROI. But at the same time, when an investor decides to consciously make investment in a project, which is climate mitigation project or environmentally pollution mitigating project, the returns may not be all that very high financially, but then it gives you environmentally positive outcomes. And a lot of investors out there in the market which are willing to put their money in such kind of projects with a view to contributing in building a better planet, a better world for all of us going forward. I talked about externality a little while before. Green finance involves internalizing environmental externalities. What happens when you set up a corporate enterprise and you start producing products and create services for the customers? Of course, you're doing a human service, but at what cost? The cost is not only what is incurred in manufacturing a product or for creating and delivering a service. What about the impact your company is having, your operations are having in the external world? That's the externality that has to be built into the overall strategy, the overall cost structure, overall profitability and sustainability of the project concerned. From the global perspective, green finance is already being widely, progressively talked about, being utilized as a catalyst, because most of the countries, most of the companies today are talking about it, learning how to do, what to do. And it's kind of a transition period right now for most of the companies across the world when they're trying to transition towards a greener economy, because it provides the necessary financial support for the development of green projects. Green financing focuses more on sustainability of the project rather than the issuer itself. Green finance is a growing phenomenon in the UK and internationally, with global transition to a low carbon economy estimated to require approximately $1 trillion per year for the foreseeable future. The question and the challenge is, where is the money going to come from? Who are people going to be making investment in these kind of projects? And if it doesn't happen, we know the consequences. So there's no getting out of it. There's no going back on this. Whatever commitments you have made, you got to consciously keep looking at your targets. How do I get the funds required for creating a more sustainable world economy, more sustainable planet going forward. And therefore, this actually presents a very, very important, significant opportunity for the financial sector. Not only a commercial opportunity, but an opportunity to demonstrate the social purpose of your very existence in the marketplace by playing a key role in bringing about the required necessary transition to a low carbon sustainable world. So where the money is going to come for the green projects in the future, you probably can have local or the national governments contributing funds to this area, or you can have financial institutions that take on environmental responsibility, or they could also be probably non-profit foundations. We have social stock exchanges across the world. Even in India, SEBI has now provided guidelines for setting up of social stock exchange where the non-governmental organization or non-profit organization shall also be able to source the funds. So that will be easier for them to be able to have access to public funds for putting their money in such kind of green projects. Or there could be green grants offered by the business sector, maybe as part of the CSR funding, corporate social responsibility. So if you invest money in a particular project, which is identified as a green project, not being a greenwash project, I mean, we have to be careful about greenwashing. A lot of people talk about green projects and talk about green initiatives, but that's only from the point of view of marketing of their venture, marketing of their enterprise. We should be wary about that. We should be very careful about understanding what is actually green and whether you are being greenwashed or not. And of course, there are going to be a lot of individual investors who consciously make a choice to make investment in green projects, even though the financial returns may not be all that very attractive as in other investment opportunities or avenues, but they are satisfied doing something good for the society, building up a better planet, building up a better world for tomorrow. They are pretty happy doing that by investing money in green projects. So green finance transactions are essentially plain financial transactions where there's going to be a lender or provider of finance, and they're going to be recipients, people who are looking to get the finance to do a project. But there are at least few features which are additionally added to a green finance transaction. First important aspect is proceeds arising out of those transactions are used exclusively for green projects. And the green element is subjected to independent third-party review and certification. How do I know? The company is claiming that the money that you provide to us is going to be used in a green project. But whether the project is actually green or not, and whether the investment qualifies to be a green finance or not, there has to be a third-party review and certification by some parties. That's what is actually happening in the marketplace. At least some of the transactions are being reviewed by third parties. Dedicated green investors, people who actually believe from the core of their hearts in this particular phenomena, that they have a responsibility of creating a better future for the future generations, will not normally invest in non-green transactions. They will always look to boost their green credentials by investing in new asset class. That is why we think green financing market is much deeper than we perceive and think. It is much more liquid than the normal financing market that we are aware of. One of the common instruments which is used for providing green finance is the green bonds. India has immense scope to diversify the green bonds market beyond the renewable energy sector, into which most of the funds have till now hitherto been channelized through the use of green bonds. Green bonds were created as a financial instrument to fund projects that have positive environmental or climate benefits. Proceeds from these bonds are earmarked for green projects, but are backed by the issuer's entire balance sheet. A company may have very many different projects, maybe 10 projects. 2 projects might be green projects, other projects could be normal commercial projects. And the company raises funds for the 2 projects which are identified as the green projects. The backing is provided by the company's entire balance sheet, consolidated balance sheet of all the 10 projects taken together, so as to provide the required confidence and required acceptability from the lender's point of view. Green bond is a normal bond, a debt instrument, which has a definite maturity period, a tenure, which has a defined identified coupon rate, which tells you how the money is going to come back to you, whether in one tranche or whether in installments over a period of time. The general idea is that proceeds or the funding by way of green bonds is going to be used either to fund projects which have a clear positive environmental impact, mostly in the renewable energy sector, or that may be used to invest in generally environmentally desirable business models or assets. There are slight variations in different types of green bonds which are prevailing in the marketplace across the world. Green use of proceeds revenue bonds. These types of green bonds are secured by the projects producing income. Use of proceed bonds. These type of bonds are secured by the assets into which the funding has gone. Securitization bond are green bonds secured by large pool of assets. And a green project bond are bonds secured by the balance sheet and the assets of the project. These are just minor corrections, beautification, offering provided to the investors, depending upon what is the interest of the lender, which particular type of funding you would like to go in for. Depending upon that, we can create very many different kinds of instruments, building about some kind of speciality, some kind of additional benefits for the investor's point of view, with a view to getting their funds into a particular project. Green bonds till now have been issued in 23 jurisdictions across the world, including 14 markets of the group of 20 nations and in 23 currencies. Most vulnerable countries, emerging markets, which are impacted by climate change related impacts, are very, very seriously looking at this particular mode and means of funding the projects to mitigate and to control the climate change negative impacts. The green bond market is nascent in emerging countries as of today, yes. It's only been last 10 years or so that the green bonds market has become lucrative. Emerging markets have been using green bonds since 2012, when South Africa made 2 issues, followed by Brazil, China, Peru, and then People's Bank in China. And the green bonds market grew to $108.6 billion US in cumulative issuances over the period of last 7 years, 2012 to 2019. In India, we have used green bonds to quite an extent in very many different organizations, mostly public sector, but yes, some private sector organizations also have used green funds to their advantage. Yes Bank, India's private sector bank, issued India's first ever green infrastructure bonds, raising an amount of INR 1,000 crores to finance green infrastructure projects in renewable energy domain, including solar power, wind power, biomass, and small hydropower projects. Export-Import Bank of India another leading banking institution of India, issued a 5-year, $500 million green bond, India's first dollar-denominated green bond to fund eligible green projects in neighboring countries, including Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Axis Bank launched India's first internationally listed and certified green bond and raised $500 million to finance climate change projects. Industrial Development Bank of India raised $350 million for renewable energy. IREDA issued a tax-free 10 billion green bonds. CLP Wind Farms, a company in the private sector, largest wind power developer in India with 1,000 megawatt of wind energy assets in the pipeline across 6 different states, became the first Indian non-bank corporate to issue green bonds, and they raised $6 billion. Renew Power, another Indian private sector company, a leading Indian clean energy company, issued green bonds to the extent of $4.51 billion to refinance bank loans for the company's 85 megawatts wind power plant in one of the important states of India, that's Maharashtra. Another company from the Hero Group, private sector, Hero Future Energies, one of India's leading industrial conglomerate, issued country's first certified climate bond and raised 3 billion rupees by issuing non-convertible debentures. India's power major company, NTPC, National Thermal Power Corporation, became first Indian corporate to raise $300 million through green masala bonds listed at London Stock Exchange as part of its efforts to promote renewable energy projects in the country. A lot of companies in India have shown a lot of interest, initiative in sourcing funds by using green bonds for the purposes of funding infrastructure and green projects, mostly in the public sector domain, in the banking sector domain, but there have been instances of even private corporate enterprises going in for sourcing of funds by way of use of green bonds. How do we spur further growth of green bond market? How do we spur and generate further interest in green finance? I think what is important is we need to have policies at the macro level, and these policies need to be administratively simple. You can have SEBI guidelines. Reserve Bank of India has recently issued guidelines on climate risk and sustainable finance. They come out with their discussion paper, which is open for public comments as of now. It's hosted on the website of Reserve Bank of India. The government is pushing the agenda for green finance, but then what we need is policies at the macro level, policies which are user-friendly, and policies which are administratively simple to implement and operate. In addition to this, of course, there is need to be educating the people with regard to the climate risk implications, as well as what can be done to combat climate risk, and more importantly and specifically, how to look at green finance as a facilitator, as an instrument for bringing about the desired outcome and desired change in the mindset of the people, and also on the ground for bringing about mitigation of the climate risks. What we need today probably is capacity building. Climate Risk and Financial Council can play a very important role here in building up capacity by organizing these kind of programs, also undertaking research projects, also probably starting off with a newsletter, maybe probably going forward, convert that into a monthly journal or a quarterly journal with a view to building capacity of the people, with a view to taking up sustainable development projects. There is a growing knowledge-based capacity building programs available already, sustainable banking network, the UN-backed principles for responsible investment, and there are efforts going on across multilateral development banks to harmonize the reporting matrices. How do we report the operation, the results, and the outcomes of the green projects that have to be different kinds of guidelines for the disclosure of such operations. Integrated reporting could be one answer. Sustainability reporting could be another answer to those kind of problems. Because disclosures are going to be very, very critical in the whole ball game of raising public awareness. Someone who puts in money obviously is interested in tracking and knowing from time to time how the funds which he provided are being utilized. What is the outcome? Definitely that can be provided by way of an appropriate comprehensive disclosure framework. Some steps have been taken in India. There are green bond issuance guidelines issued by SEBI, and there is a separate platform available on the Mumbai Stock Exchange for issuance of the green bonds. But of course, a lot more steps need yet to be taken. However, the corporates in India right now are deterred by high transaction costs, stamp duties, and other taxes which are leviable on the green bonds issued by the company. Of course, there are a lot of challenges in assimilating, absorbing green finance and green bonds. Challenges include false compliance claims, non-standard definition. There's no standard definition as of now as to what's the green project or what constitutes a green loan. There are maturity mismatches between long-term green investment and relatively short-term interests of the investors. But these challenges are not insurmountable. They can definitely be taken care of by appropriate actions being taken by all concerned, all stakeholders joining together in deliberations and discussions. Deepening of the corporate bond market will definitely help in encouraging corporates to use the green bonds. Standardization of green investment terminology. What is the green project? What is the green bond? What is green finance? We need to have standardization of these terminologies. There has to be a consistent corporate reporting framework. And obviously, there is need for removing information asymmetry between the investors and the recipients, which can make a significant contribution in addressing some of the shortcomings which are being faced currently by the green finance market. I recently made a reference to the RBI discussion paper on climate risk and sustainable finance. This paper talks about banks should set voluntary target for green finance as a part of their commitment to scale up lending for green finance. The Reserve Bank on its part would seek to encourage banks to set a voluntary funding target to increase green funding, of course, with the approval of their board of directors. RBI is talking about the banks should set limits and the banks should set targets for themselves with regard to green finance with the approval of their board of directors, so that slowly and slowly the concept will catch up in the entire banking and financial sector, and it spur up the development of green finance market in India for helping out in projects which are green projects and also for mitigation of climate risk. In other words, they may set an incremental target for green finance over short, medium, and long term towards certain identified sectors. RBI recommends that the banks should set targets, short term, medium term, long term, and also identify specific sectors within which they're going to fund the projects, depending upon the priority of the country, depending upon the priorities of the government of India, and also that of the specific bank. They need to set incremental targets, Kaizen. We don't want to leapfrog. Let it be a slow journey, but let it be a consistent, sustainable, successful journey going forward. So we are looking at only incremental targets. We don't want to leapfrog. The achievement of these targets may be reviewed annually to assess the positive environmental outcomes. Now, of course, there are challenges. How do we assess the outcome of a green project? It may not be amenable to direct, quantifiable, measurable standards or yardsticks, but nonetheless, in the social development project area, there are certain parameters, there are certain matrices available and being consistently used all across the world by which we can definitely assess and measure the positive environmental outcomes arising from a project. RBI paper is talking about green branches. In order to green the banking processes by making them more environment friendly, banks could consider converting their branches to green branches by eliminating the use of paper in their operations, introducing option of e-receipts at their ATMs. And the banks may also look at regulated entities. Banks or regulated entities may also look at ways and means to incentivize adoption of e-receipts. Green branches. We are talking about green buildings. We look at green offices. We look at green corporate governance practices. We're looking at green boards. The boards are getting green. Board of directors are getting green. Likewise, the banks may also like to convert all their data centers to green data centers by switching over to renewable energy for sourcing power for their data centers and implement guidance provided by established frameworks like green data center rating systems. RBI guidelines further recommend all the banks must have a committee or a subcommittee at the board level, which should comprise of representatives, experts drawn from sustainability and risk domain. And this committee should have the responsibility of guiding climate-related policy, strategy, objective setting, and performance monitoring for the bank. What is important is this committee must consist of people drawn from relevant sectors with relevant experience, mindset, and commitment, so that they are able to provide the required guidance in development of climate-related policy, strategy, setting up of KRAs, key result areas, and of course, consistent, continuous performance monitoring over a period of time. This committee can also look at mandating processes to identify and manage climate-related environmental risk and opportunities. We need to identify what are the processes which are related to climate risk or environmental risk. And with every challenge, of course, there comes an opportunity. They should then look at how do you use that opportunity, leverage that opportunity to bring about the desired change in the global arena. The committee should also look at monitoring timely and regular updation of internal risk matrix, mitigation measures taken by the bank, and what has been the effectiveness of these measures over a period of time. In India, we already have a provision for certain class of companies which are listed at the stock exchanges to have a mandatory risk committee. Similarly, in the banks also, there is a mandatory requirement of having a risk committee. But here what we are talking about is a committee specifically constituted as a board subcommittee to look at the green aspect or the green finance or climate risk and sustainable finance focus. We're looking at a committee of the board or a subcommittee of the board. And then, of course, this committee can also monitor and oversee progress on relevant goals and targets and provide guidance on how do we disclose, what are the kind of disclosures which are going out in the market, both in terms of content as well as depth. It is not only important what you communicate, but what is important is what is required to be communicated by the general public, by the stakeholders. You may think that you have provided relevant disclosures, but from the perspective of the investor, that may not just be adequately enough. So you got to see on the other side, you got to see from the perspective of the investor and the stakeholders, what is that they would like to have, what is the information they would like to have, so as to bridge the gap between what you are providing and what they're expecting, and there should be no information asymmetry. So to conclude, green finance is the financing of projects that encourage the development of a sustainable economy. Green finance is a common generic term which might refer to, at the macro level, all financial initiatives, all processes, various products, various services that are designed to protect the natural environment and to manage how the environment impacts finance and investment. It's a strategy. It's a strategic approach. Green finance has to be adopted and accepted as a strategic approach to incorporate the financial sector in the transformation process, in the transition of economy to a low carbon economy, resource efficient economies, and in the context of adaptation to the climate change. Of course, it's good to go green, but requires serious efforts, requires huge amount of investment, requires transformation of the business from, rather than being just business as usual, you got to do things differently, you got to think differently, you got to fund the projects differently. It involves a lot of commitment, determination, resilience on the part of the important players in the corporate world to be able to actually make an impact towards a sustainable economy. Of course, there is a danger, the temptation to greenwash may rise in future. It's already there. Some of the companies are using the greening concept to market their services, market their company as a marketing gimmick, as a marketing tool. The temptation to greenwash may further rise in future. That's where one has got to be cautious about and tread the path very, very cautiously. It is important to ensure that governance in labeling and verification process is appropriate to avoid such an eventuality of greenwash, as there is no second earth available to us. Sustainable action is absolutely necessary. For developing economies like India, the challenge is to get green finance into the mainstream. As of now, there are just a handful of people in India who are talking about green finance. Handful of banks were looking at it very seriously. Handful of the corporates, both in the public and the private sector, which have access funds to the green market, but not many. The number has to increase. Awareness has to go forward. Awareness has to increase. It has to become part of the mainstream of the Indian economy. This has to be done while maintaining a balance between economic growth and social development. Mobilization of huge financial resources towards climate sustainable future is only one part of the challenge. There has to be a balance between economic growth and social development. We look at GDP as a yardstick, as an indicator as to where an economy stands. And today's newspaper carry a news item. Indian economy is today 5th largest economy of the world. We have recently just pipped UK and went ahead to the 5th position. Earlier, we were having 6th position in the world out of 195 countries. Very, very encouraging. But when you look at gross national happiness index, where are we? Far behind. The top 5 position in the GNHI, Gross National Happiness Index, which looks at the social developmental perspective, the top 5 positions are occupied by Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden. And that's where we need to make a transition towards. And that's why the present government in India is focusing on getting around and building around inclusive growth. Because to increase our GDP, we're looking at becoming a $5 trillion US economy over the next few years. But equally important is equitable distribution of GDP in the country, increase the per capita income, bring the people up from the bottom of the pyramid, get them out of the BPL, below the poverty line. That's how social development can actually happen in the country. And green finance in that arena can play a huge role in bringing about the kind of transformation that we are looking to getting in India during the next 25 years in our run-up to 100 years of independence, 2047. And this is, we are living through an Amrit Kal. As our Prime Minister had mentioned, This is going to be a golden period for India. Amrit Kal, the next 25 years are run up to 100 years of independence, spurring up to 2047. What we require is collaborative effort. We need to have government, policy makers, regulators, academicians, professionals, corporate, NGOs, and why not people on the street. You talk of corporate social responsibility. I say, even more than CSR, what's important is ISR, individual social responsibility. What is that each one of us can do within our realm? What is that I can do? What is that you can do? Corporates will do whatever they have to do. Government will do whatever is required. But what is that I can do at my end? What is that you can do? Each one of us individually. That is the collaborative effort required to bring about the desired change with a view to making this planet and the world economy a sustainable economy. And the financial system is the nervous system in the heart of the entire global economy. And therefore, we need to use leverage very, very carefully, strategically, this financial system with a view to building a global economy which is hugely sustainable going forward. Thank you so very much. That's where I end my formal presentation. I'll be pleased to answer a few questions if there are any, or any observations from any one of the participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, fantastic session.
Please go ahead.
I mean, really, I mean, this session was really positive in terms that we talked about lots of positive things happening, right? Rather than saying that, climate is changing and we are not adapting. I think the entire tone was positive. But I have one question, sir.
Yes,
so any financial institution currently is ROTE driven. Okay, they want the return on tangible equity to be pretty high in double digits in the short to medium term, and also they're talking about net zero, okay, which is again medium to long term, right? But when I see both have conflicting interests, okay, right? So what would be the ideal strategy to bridge both of these, sir, right? I know green financing is something good, but is it very lucrative? Because we talked about Exim Bank financing something in Sri Lanka, but Sri Lanka has gone bankrupt, right? Yeah. So I mean, how do financial institutions sustain this period of transition, sir? Any idea?
I understand that. The point is there are two types of institutions emerging in the financial market. One, the traditional ones which are operating. They have been funding conventional projects till now, but of late they have started looking at the green projects also as one of the vertical. Maybe that vertical might be just very small to begin with as of now, but they have started looking at that vertical, the vertical for green projects. But at the same time, there are certain specialized financial institutions sprucing up all across the world, which are specifically being created for the purpose of funding of the green projects. Now, for any one of these two projects, the point that you have raised, that there is obviously a conflict between your financial yardstick of evaluating a project and the desirability of getting a social return on that SROI, social return on investment, and the outcomes in terms of climate risk mitigation, environment friendly products and all that. Definitely there is a conflict between the two, but at the same time, what the experts are getting around to doing is they're trying to structure the funding in such a manner that the investor gets a return. I'm not saying a lucrative return, but he gets a financial return, at the same time gets positive outcome from the project, and that provides him a lot of mental satisfaction at the same time. Let me add here, this is happening because at the ground level, there are many, many people across the world, including in India, which have a mindset, returns don't really matter to me. Whether I get 11%, 12%, or 6%, 7%, what matters to me at this point of time is that I should be able to make some contribution to this world to make it a better world. Yeah, I mean, there are a large number of people with this kind of a thinking, which is fast becoming more aggressive now, and that's where the balancing will happen over a period of time going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, there are some questions on the chat box. I'm looking at that. Are there guidelines globally available on the methodology for classifying a project as green? Yes, sir, there are certain guidelines available, but these are not standardized. There are different models available. UN Sustainable Climate Model, Green Paris Climate Agreement also talks about how a green project should be identified, but probably there is difference in the yardstick, difference in definition, difference in characteristics and parameters. Going forward, what we are looking for is some kind of a standardization of these terminologies, definition, so that all of us look at a green project as a green project anywhere in the world from every angle. But there are some guidelines definitely available as of today. Yes, please, Mr. Anirudh, you have observation to make. Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Gupta,
Good
and
evening, sir.
thank you so much for the really
Thank you.
insightful session. Uh, I am a mechanical engineer by degree and a sustainability professional by heart. I
Wow.
lead the sustainability at Hero Motocorp, reporting to the global head sustainability, and I am supported by a team of analysts. So since I'm globally leading the initiative, so it is not only limited to our manufacturing plants, but it is also limited. It also covers our value chain. So we are now going to start the TCFD exercise in phased wise manner. The first will be on quantitative and qualitative aspects. So through regular capacity building, I have actually succeeded in evolving the mindset of my company, but I'm really facing with so much difficulty in evolving the mindset of our supply chain partners, where the real risk lies actually, because 85 to 90% of our dependency of the complete business is on the value chain.
Absolutely.
And it really becomes difficult to make them sensitize that climate change is really a business threat, also a risk to humankind. So my first question is how to make them really sensitive towards this agenda, and second, how green bonds concept or the green finance concept can act as an enabler so that I can really make them aware, and rather I would be able to change their mindset to right from profits, they should start thinking for the planet also. So that's my particular two basic fundamental
Absolutely, absolutely. Great thought process over there. And you've been
Thank you.
actually experiencing this kind of a problem. I know that suppliers or the vendors, they form a very important network, critical network for any company for that matter. Downstream as well as upstream, both ways. I mean, whatever products you manufacture, you've got to sell them out. So there has to be distribution partners and channel partners. But at the downstream level, you have the vendors who provide the inputs and the raw material and supplies to the company. Now, it's not only important for the company to become sensitive to green initiatives, but as you rightly said, we also need to inculcate this thought process and thinking in the minds of our channel partners or the vendors as well. So same strategy is going to work. You got to first encourage them to adopt these strategies, but simply telling them will not happen. Probably you need to educate them by conducting some kind of seminars, webinars, educational initiatives, and further, they're going to come back to you and tell you, sir, it's going to cost me a lot of money if I undertake a green project, as you are suggesting to me. And then probably the company can look at in what way you can probably sponsor, help them out, provide them some kind of a financial aid, provide them hand-holding so that they're able to slowly migrate, transition to green activities and green structuring of their own function for that matter. So obviously there can probably not be any one ready-made solution kind of thing for these kind of challenges, which all of us are facing in the corporate world. But a beginning can be made by first sensitizing them by way of keeping an interactive mode with them, telling them, educating them, organizing seminar conferences, and then probably hand-holding, including funding if required by them for certain aspect, so that ultimately all of you, the entire value chain becomes green value chain and all of you benefit together from that out.
Okay. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Dr.
sir.
Gupta.
Thank you, Gupta ji. Thank you, Gupta.
Thank you.
Yeah, Andrew and Ruth for the question, and everybody who raised questions. Okay, so for the time constraint, we will have to close the session, and whoever want to ask the question, they can write
Absolutely.
us.
Let's stay connected. We have all shared our emails in the chat box.
Sure.
And it's a small, compact group. All of us have the same kind of thinking, same kind of thought process. Let's stay connected. Share emails, share a WhatsApp group, whatever.
And whatever
try
questions,
to do whatever we can do in this direction.
Whatever questions you have in your mind, which you wanted to ask but you could not, you can write us at social media
Absolutely.
at crfconcept.org. We will forward it to Dr. Gupta.
Sure.
And we can go ahead with the answers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
everybody
Thank
who
you.
joined. Yeah.